At the end of the day, your brand is what people say about you.
Getting initial traction and then just doubling down on that.
When people purchase your products, they're saying something very specific about themselves.
Welcome to On the Fly.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of On the Fly. Today we're going to be talking about sourcing, finding products from the Far East and turning them into brilliant products for your brand. I've got Alan Scanlan, who is head of operations at Hook Home and the owner of Source Find Asia. Alan has about 15 years in the sourcing industry, and he's an expert on all things manufacturing. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for the intro, Dan.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with working in the Far East?
Yeah, sure. I'll go kind of right back to the start. So my family business have been sourcing and manufacturing goods mainly out of China for 50 years. We actually turned 50 on the 3rd of May. So my dad started the business in 1973, was going out to Hong Kong at that stage because mainland China wasn't open until 1978, but was kind of part of the first flow of Irish businessmen and entrepreneurs to hit mainland China when it opened. So at the time was buying anything and everything that he could get his hands on, kind of rulers, toys, and wholesaling them in Ireland, based out of what is now Silicon Docks. He was down there when it was a dodgy part of Dublin. So about 5 or 6 years into the business, someone had knocked on the door with a soft toy leprechaun and had asked them to get this made out in China. And that kind of brought us into the souvenir business, where we would be one of 2 of the biggest wholesalers of Irish souvenirs. So any leprechaun or shamrock or anything green that you see in carols and all over Dublin, that's probably coming from us, our main competitor. About 12 years ago, we bought Tipperary Crystal, the brand, which we've kind of flipped on its head. It was 95% glassware at the time of when we bought it and 5% giftware. And now it's 95% giftware, 5% glassware. So we've multiple stores all over Ireland. We have a big online presence, and that company is currently run by both of my older brothers. I was in there for about 9 years. I was mainly on the packaging side of the business and the sourcing side of the business. And then, around 2016, I had decided that I needed to make a bit of a change, get away from the family, and moved out to Hong Kong in April 2017, set up my own sourcing company, which at the time was called Nugent Sourcing. I've since merged that with my long-term business partner's company, Source Find Asia. And as of recently have come on board with the team at Hook Home, which is a flat pack furniture company based out of Brooklyn, New York.
So your history and your and growing up, it really probably placed you perfectly well to get into the e-commerce industry.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've vivid memories of our Friday night meals at home in Bray, and we'd sit around the table talking about business and talking about China. And then from quite an early age, I was working in the warehouse. I probably shouldn't say what age I was, because I think child labor laws would be an issue at this stage. But was in the warehouse. And then when I started in the company, was straight out to Hong Kong, and out to the Canton Fair, out to factories in China. So that was around 2000 and was it 2007, 2008. So real eye-opening experience. I mean, it would have been a great time to get into the e-com business at that stage, but just wasn't really aware of it, or it was only kind of coming on the scene, I suppose, in its second wave at that stage. But yeah, it's for sure it wasn't as accessible. Like you didn't have your Shopify's of this world to set up your business quite easily. And then Alibaba was a very different company back then as well. It was mainly focused on larger industries and direct to factories rather than consumers.
Yeah, so bring that to my point about so Alibaba has really made this very accessible for brands or for people to start companies and access products. And maybe the ease of accessibility through Alibaba has meant that a lot of people are probably buying I won't necessarily say substandard products, but just the simple ease of sourcing products means that a lot of websites now will be selling the same kind of stuff, all coming from the same factory. And what I wanted to talk about in this podcast is how brands can kind of, people can be a bit more creative with the products that they sell and kind of go past that type of white labeling from Alibaba and really find truly unique quality products. Over the past couple of years in e-commerce, it felt like in 2017, 2018, you merely had to just show up with some nice ads, decent branding, and eureka, you've got yourself an e-commerce business. And then the pandemic happened, and it probably gave a false perception of how hard e-commerce was actually going to get in the very near future. And for me personally, I arrived back down to earth, and a lot of other people did in 2021, wondering why we weren't selling as much as we were anymore. And I think a big reason for that is the realization of the consumer that, look, I know these guys are getting their goods from Alibaba. They're slapping a logo on it, but I need something more than that. And that more, in my opinion, it's the amalgamation of a few different things: the storytelling, the end-to-end user experience. But probably the biggest differentiator from your standard white labeling brand is creating a truly unique product. How much of a competitive advantage can the creation of a truly unique product give to your business?
I mean, listen, yeah, I think it can give a significant competitive advantage to your brand. A unique product can differentiate you from the competitors, can create a perception of exclusivity. I think unique products can also help you tap into niche markets that may be underserved by existing products. And by filling a gap in the market, you can attract customers who are looking for something a bit different. I suppose a good example, and something we had kind of touched on before we started recording, I had a gym apparel company as well called Earned Athletic Apparel, which I launched a month before COVID hit, and actually during the protests and riots here in Hong Kong. So had quite a lot of issues at the start of the brand, but I loved the brand, obviously, and I thought our product was great, and I thought our branding and values and all that sort of stuff, I was so immersed in it that I thought everything was brilliant. But now, looking back after ultimately it's failed, it didn't have a unique selling point. It was another apparel brand. The world doesn't need more apparel brands. Why would you buy Earned over Nike, Gymshark, whatever it is? And now with the new company I'm working with Hook Home, who have a very unique product, which is a patented lock snap system for their legs, that's completely unique to anyone in the world. And that's where the value add is. And around that, you can create your brand and your values and your content. And that's all super, super important. But at the end of the day, we're selling a product that no one else in the world has. And I think that's going to give us a massive advantage. And I think that's where I massively fell, or one of the reasons. There was lots of reasons why Earn didn't succeed, but one of the reasons was there was no unique selling point. It was just another t-shirt. It was just another pair of shorts.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to people to kind of think of these unique ideas? I know obviously the idea in itself, but people tend to gravitate towards the kind of simple ideas of like, as simpler ideas like earned apparel, like kind of like white labeling and slightly tweaking products. And they're kind of, is it a lack of know-how on how to begin the process of creating something unique?
I mean, it's a creative aspect to it, right? So the two founders of Hook Home, Connor and Brian, are both extremely talented architects and designers. They're both Harvard graduates, and they're bringing the talent to the table. And hopefully myself and the rest of the team are bringing the other aspects, that my experience with D2C, my experience with sourcing and manufacturing in China. But I think like it's very accessible to create a brand nowadays, right? Like you set up a Shopify store, you go into Alibaba, you can find it, and anyone can do that. But you have to have unique selling points to your brand, and that's the harder aspect of it. So that creativity is difficult, right? It's easier for me to create an earned apparel than it is for me to create a Hook Home, because I don't know how to build a table or have that creative mindset for that. So I think that's the kind of main reason. Like I'm a big believer and big fan of first to market. So I think like you can bring a concept to a new marketplace and have great success with it. The reason I did Earned is because it was based off CrossFit's growth at the time. There was no CrossFit brand in Asia. So my aim was first to market. CrossFit's on a rise in China, and that's the angle that I was going with it. So I think you can do that, but I mean, how many apparel brands have we seen since Gymshark came on the market, and people are just rinse and repeating, trying to create the kind of same thing that they've done, which I just don't think will work.
Yeah. There's too many. When you talk about like the Hook Home founders and being architects, do you think it's a necessity to have that kind of like engineering or like kind of technical expertise in order to do this type of stuff? Or I don't particularly know how something that complex works when you're getting it manufactured in China. Could I potentially have this like unique idea, but I don't come from that technical background? Does that make the process a lot harder, or what does the process look like?
So generally, when we get asked to source an item, the customer's coming to us with an idea or a plan in their head, whether it's creating a box for their whiskey brand, whether it's looking at different types of packaging, whether they're coming to us with a candle idea. They're coming to us with an idea. We obviously have to get a certain amount of information from them to get a quote and get an idea of kind of the minimum order quantity and all that sort of side of the business. But when it's a technical item like Hook, we would tend to send a sample to the factory to make. If we were just sending drawings, it can get very difficult because you're dealing with people who are speaking a different language as well. And like I always say this, there's the language barrier of actual Mandarin, and then there's the language barrier of how Chinese people operate. So the way a Chinese business mind works is very, very different to people back west. And there's certain ways of talking in email and on phones and on WeChat of how to get your message across. So a lot of stuff can get lost in translation, even though they might have perfect English. And there's a thing, the Chinese, yes, they'll never say no, they don't understand, because they don't want to lose face. So that causes a huge amount of issues as well. So for something like the Hook table, we've sent out samples to our factories that I've gone to see and vet and make sure everything, like to make sure they're just the right standard to produce the product for us. But they didn't get it right the first time. So like you have to do 2 or 3 samples, and they had a sample, like they had it there in their workshop creating it. So it's a bit more complicated, but I always tend that's the kind of best way. And I did it with Earned as well. When I would create tech packs for all of our products, you'd send it to the factory, and 9 times out of 10, the first sample was the wrong size or it didn't fit right. So what we would do is we'd get the t-shirts that we really like or the shorts that we really like and send them to the factory and go match this size with our design on it.
Do you think it helps to have someone on the ground? Do you think these kind of things can be done remotely from like somewhere like the UK or the US, or it's obviously a massive advantage to have someone on the ground? Is it a necessity?
Yeah. Listen, it's definitely more complicated when you don't have someone on the ground. We have a team in Guangzhou of Chinese people, so that just makes it a lot easier for us because they're speaking Chinese to each other, and our staff get the process and how things work. And I know you touched on Alibaba there. Alibaba is an interesting one because there are certain ways you use Alibaba and there's certain ways you search on it to make sure that you're getting the right type of factory. Because again, the problem is if you go on and you search whatever apparel, and all these factories come up and they all say they produce for Gymshark. It's quite funny, and they'll all have Gymshark images, and people think, great, I've got a Gymshark factory, and it's not. And then again, it comes back to that communication. People are asking certain questions and it's not getting understood, or they're not asking the right questions. Things get lost in translation and your samples don't come right, or you're spending money and wasting time on it as well. So it can be done, but it definitely takes a lot longer to get from A to Z rather than having boots on the ground. And a lot of people use our sourcing services mainly out of peace of mind, because there's still a lot of trust issues with dealing with manufacturing in China. And I've been doing this for 15 years. I don't think it's a case of any Chinese factories trying to rip people off. It's more of mistakes happening because people don't understand or aren't asking the right questions. And then when the mistakes happen, the factory go, oh, well, you never said this, this, and this. And the customer is annoyed because it's wrong and they think they're right. So it's that communication that really kind of messes a lot of things up. So a lot of people use us purely for security reasons, because they know the goods are going to be sent what they've ordered, and the container is going to be arriving in good condition.
Like there's a stigma with consumers when they hear that that a brand is sourcing products from Alibaba. Is it a case? I've often wondered this. Is it a case where like it's necessary for Chinese manufacturers to be on Alibaba, or is there a whole subsection of manufacturers in China that aren't on Alibaba and would consider themselves maybe a little bit more premium?
I would think most are on Alibaba at this stage. There's different grades to Alibaba in terms of gold suppliers and stuff. The big kind of older school factories mightn't. Some of the larger packaging factories that we deal with, I don't think have a presence there.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there. That thought came into my mind because I was I source glasses cases, hard cases from China,
yeah.
And I couldn't find the factory that I've been using for years. They just seem to have disappeared from Alibaba, and I was worried that they closed down. And I was like, oh god, we're gonna have to get like new cases now. We won't be able to have the uniform ones that we've always used. But I found the email address, emailed them, and they're like, oh, we've actually just we've removed ourselves from Alibaba because it's too expensive, which was surprising for me, because I'm unsure then about how they can find customers, because you know I don't know as much about this world as you at all. So I was perplexed that like, is this not a terrible business decision for them? And is there anything that can justify it?
I have heard costs on Alibaba going up. A lot of these factories show at the Canton Fair, which is the biggest trade show in the world, as far as I know. It's on twice a year in April and October in Guangzhou, and it's basically 3 football stadiums full of factories with booths, and a lot of them would go there and show. There's a pretty high cost to show at the fair, but it's where all buyers from all over the world will go. It was actually back open last month for the first time in 3 years. But I like a lot of factories would get their main business from that or Alibaba. So possibly not a good decision unless they're just getting no business from Alibaba. There is other websites in China that most people don't know about. So there's one called Taobao, which we use a lot here in Hong Kong. So if I want to get whatever, I've got like this pot plant here. If I want to get one of those, I'll go onto Taobao and find it, and it will get shipped to me in 24 hours. And you pay like whatever, half the cost that I'd pay for it down the road in the flower shop. Or it's, if you go onto Amazon and are looking for a product, I'd always go into Taobao and you'd find the same product for about 3/4 of the price. Now, it's quite difficult to use the Taobao site. It's a mess. A lot of Chinese sites are just full of too much information. And then there's another website below that called, I think it's called 1664. But like, unless you can speak Chinese, you're not getting onto that at all. And you can find manufacturers who will do like notebooks and pens and very basic items, but they'll be 1/4 of the price that they are on Alibaba. But again, it's like there's levels to it all in China. There's so many of these companies and different ways of getting stuff made. And a lot of the people on Taobao on this 1664, I think I wouldn't quote me on that name. I can't remember what it's called, but they wouldn't have any export services, so they couldn't ship goods outside of China. And sometimes when we need to do small quantities, we'll go to these type of factories to get the product.
Yeah, that sounds like a potential disaster waiting to happen using those
Yeah. I wouldn't advise people to do it unless you have someone who can speak Chinese. It's not straightforward.
Um, trying to think of like something we could talk about really that would maybe help to give like value to people listening. If there's brands who are maybe at a stage of doing let's say like 10 to 100k per month maybe, and looking to like take it to the next level. Like maybe these brands, they're people who come from a marketing background and have, you know, they've created a brand, sourced a product. It's a white labeled product, but they've put their own spin on it. And I remember myself when I got to that stage, I was advised by somebody in the optical industry that I needed to kind of like diversify the number of factories that I was sourcing goods from in case anything went wrong. But I've always been very reluctant to switch factories because I have that level of trust there. But maybe it was necessary if I wanted to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, so what we do when we quote for someone, we always get three quotes, and we'll always have a backup factory to a product. But it's like anything, when you've got a good factory supplying you with a good product, why would you move? Because you're just going to cause more work and more headaches if things go wrong. But it's always good to have that backup option. So I would potentially say just get ready for that. So send them get samples made from another factory, just so you know they can do it. That if something does go wrong, you can switch things around. In terms of making the product more unique, um, opening, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the process is for making sunglasses, but possibly opening molds. So designing your own glasses and so you're making them unique, and then you're opening up a mold to make those glasses, and then you can own the mold. So it's your unique type of sunglass, and maybe you're selling that story in your branding and your marketing. Um, like I was talking about with the tins and the candles earlier on, when you open up a mold for a tin, you can create your own embossing. You can put your logo on it. It looks a lot more high end than having a sticker wrapped around it. And that makes it more unique to your brand. And packaging is really powerful for that. So you were talking about the covers for your sunglasses, making a unique cover, maybe with your logo embossed or debossed on top of it, that when people get it, it's perceived value and they're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm going to keep this. I'm not going to, like, if it's a box or if it's the cover, obviously they're not going to throw the cover out for your sunglasses, but maybe the box it comes in. It's like, and the best company in the world to do that are Apple. So Apple is a sensory experience. When you open that box and you get that feeling, like that's designed because people like that. And like, how many people keep their Apple iPhone boxes in their bottom drawer in their desk? Like, you don't throw them away because it's perceived value. You're like, I don't throw this away. It's like throwing away $20. And that's what Apple want to create. And then you've got that box sitting around. It's brand awareness. It's that constant recognition of how great and superior Apple are compared to anyone else. And I think you can do that in lots of different ways with packaging. And we my family business, my sister's side of the business does called Allied International, does a lot of packaging for Marks and Spencers, a lot of chocolate packaging. And Marks and Spencers told us at the start that it's 80% down to packaging, 20% down to content, why people are picking it up. So you're running late to see your mother-in-law, you see this box of chocolates and you go, that's a pretty box. I'm going to buy this as a gift. So packaging, I think, would be a great way to do that. We did that with our candles for Tipperary Crystal, when we upped the packaging, made it a bit more high end, rigid boxes with a nice ribbon on it. And again, it's a lovely perceived gift for your mother-in-law, for your wife, for your girlfriend, at a good price point.
You have brands maybe that have started off with this like basic white labeling, and maybe they've gotten to a stage now where the brand has been a success, and in order to take the next level, they feel like they need to kind of like protect their products more. They need to add like a moat around their products, which might require like a more advanced level of customization or tooling that goes into that. But obviously that's very capital intensive. It's risky. It's kind of a scary jump to make. I've always personally wondered about like what is the best way of making that jump, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very brand and product dependent on where you are with a product. Um,
Like how much can these things like usually cost? I know you talked about molds can be like $6,000 for like a mold, but I mean, if you've got a lot of different products and you have a lot of big plans, it's obviously an extremely expensive process. Is there any kind of like, what's the best way of doing this?
Again, it's all product dependent, right? So like tin mold is $6,000, but if you're doing a plastic item, the mold could be $100. So all molds are different. Again, kind of back to the packaging point, I think packaging is a great way to level up your brand and put some unique aspects to it, and having perceived expensive value in your packaging, whether it's a rigid box, whether it's wooden boxes, which we do a lot of wooden boxes for whiskey brands for their older whiskies. And when you're gifted that, it feels high end, it feels exclusive. People want to keep it, they'll leave it sitting around their house again for that brand awareness. You don't want to chuck it out. So that would be my real go-to, because again, it is just so specific on each product that you're making. So it's definitely one way of making it a bit more unique.
Yeah, I 100% agree on the packaging aspect of it. The customer experience and the unboxing, I think, is a huge contributor to like word of mouth marketing and retention. And for me, it's been like kind of a bit of secret sauce, I think, over the last 5 years. We do have quite a nice unboxing experience, and I think that has gone a long way to make it feel like a more premium product. It's probably something where drop shippers fall down on, in that they don't control that end-to-end process, and can't, add in this type of stuff. What are your thoughts on drop shipping as a viable business option in this like hyper competitive world we find ourselves in?
I hate drop shipping. I'm not a fan. I just think you can't build brand value or brand awareness from drop shipping. Like you kind of mentioned, you're sitting in the middle. They find a factory on Alibaba, they go with a trend, they make a bit of quick money, but then once the product starts falling apart, or they start having issues and you start building up your bad reviews, they're just on to the next thing. So yeah, I don't think it's a viable business. I don't think it's a long-term business. You get a huge amount of it out this side of the world. Guys sitting in Bali, guys sitting in Thailand doing it, but you can't build a brand off the back of it. It's just it's a quick dollar. It's going to get rich. Well, not even get rich quick. It's just making a bit of extra pocket change.
Are there any trends or kind of ways you see this the sourcing of products specifically for D2C headed in the near future?
So there's a lot of talk at the moment and a lot of movements. I suppose it all started with the Trump tariffs, and a lot of talk about brand or factories moving out of China. A lot of manufacturing has moved to Mexico in the last couple of years, and their industry is growing quite rapidly. A lot of stuff is moving to India. Apple being the prime example of Foxconn, the Taiwanese company who are based in China at the moment, are pumping huge money into a facility in India. I very much see China as moving away from cheaper products. So they want to elevate their manufacturing. They're manufacturing a huge amount of electric cars, and they want to become the world's number one manufacturer in EV, which they kind of are, and they've grown that massively over the last 3 or 4 years. So they're kind of moving away from. They don't want to be the place that manufactures pennies t-shirts. They want to they're upping their level. When Trump brought in the tariffs, there was huge talk about everything moving out, and it just didn't happen. Chinese factories definitely set up in Vietnam and in Cambodia, but again, they're Chinese run operations, so they're all pretty good and run very well. But a lot of people who did move are people that I know that moved to Cambodia and Vietnam for production in particular, got their fingers burnt and had issues because they're just so far behind China. Like China have been doing this for 4 decades now, and they've gotten, in the 15 years that I've been in the business, the growth in terms of the quality of goods, quality of sampling, the service, the marketing from factories as well, which was not existent 15 years ago, has gotten so much better. And I think there's certain regions that are really good. Like Vietnam is brilliant for shoes, is brilliant for bags, for outerwear. But in terms of the best place, I still think China is number one by a long shot.
So the implications for your kind of regular D2C is that what might potentially happen is that they're going to be priced out of using Chinese warehouses, or that those Chinese factories, but those factories might not even exist, and they will have to move to somewhere like India or Cambodia, and the product just won't have the same level of quality.
No, I think it's going to be a long time before China stops being the world factory. Like, I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime, unless something really goes pear-shaped with the whole US, Taiwanese, Chinese thing, and goods maybe are banned from being imported from China into America. But again, they both make so much money off the back and forth. I just can't see that happening. I don't see China being the number one go-to for all of that stuff. Like, no one else has an Alibaba. There is other countries that use Alibaba, but it's nowhere near the amount of product that can be choosed in China. And again, the kind of quality for me across the board would be highest in China. I think it's 33% of the world's goods are still produced there. So it's going to be a while before. I would think Mexico would be the one for me that will be a big winner out of all the troubles at the moment. But I've no experience with that, and their big advantage is that they're on the doorstep to the US, so you're taking away freight costs.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? When I think of sourcing products from other countries except China, I'm like, oh no, I wouldn't trust them. Whereas, 10 years ago, everybody would be like, I don't trust Chinese products. So they've done a pretty good job in building up that trust for the manufacturing of goods. Thanks a million for joining us, Alan, and interesting insights on the state of the manufacturing in Far East.
Cool. Cheers, Dan. Thanks for having me.